Even in the 12-team college football playoff, we're still fighting over who gets those last couple spots. And it was the ACC last year who snagged the last two, barely getting two teams, with Clemson getting an automatic qualifying bid as the ACC champion, getting that 12 seed, and SMU barely hanging on for the last at-large bid. Despite being 11-2, there were several SEC teams with 9 wins, Alabama being the most notable, who really came seemingly, at least we hear, close to stealing that spot from them after losing to Clemson in the ACC championship. So if the margins are that narrow and the perception of the ACC is that much worse than the SEC, and I'm certainly not claiming that the ACC is as good as the SEC, but it's critical for it to be close enough that the ACC runner-up or first team out of the championship, whatever it may be, gets a fair shot against these good but not top 2 or 3 SEC teams. And so it's with that there's going to be a couple games, first couple weeks of the season, they're really going to set the tone for the ACC, how people perceive the conference and some of these teams. And so as the season gets going and we're at ACC Media Days and things are starting to get hyped up, here's some games that are really going to set the tone. The first one, Georgia Tech going to Colorado. This is a really interesting one. Obviously, Colorado's got a ton of publicity these last couple of years with Deion Sanders there. But this really should be a rebuilding season for them. Travis Hunter's gone. Shedeur Sanders is gone. This offense is likely to take a pretty big step back. Last year, Colorado made a good run at making that Big 12 championship game, falling just short. But this year, as we look at it, Arizona State, Texas Tech, Baylor, there's a lot of teams slated above them. Really, Kansas State's another one. There's a lot of teams in the mix for like kind of early projections to make that Big 12 championship game. Colorado's not really one. They're in maybe the third quartile of teams in that conference looking ahead. Meanwhile, Georgia Tech has really been building up to this year. Even though they've won 7 games the last 2 years, a lot of that's because they play really, really hard schedules. And so they're probably better than those records indicate. They took Georgia to 8 overtimes last year. With Haynes King and Jamal Haynes at running back coming back, this could be an unbelievable offense, one of their best in a long time. Now, the defense could be so-so. The defense might not be great. They lost Tyler Santucci to the Ravens in the NFL, but they still have a really good chance to be one of the 5 best teams in the ACC. And so if you have maybe ACC, call it ACC 5 behind Clemson, SMU, Miami, and Louisville. If they're 5 or 6 in the ACC, but Colorado's 8 or 9 or 10 in the Big 12, even though you're going on the road, this is one Georgia Tech really needs to set the tone for themselves, their season, as well as for the conference. And so this is a big one to start it off. One of the 2 biggest games of week 1 will be an ACC-SEC showdown with Clemson against LSU. It was back in 2012 that Clemson beat LSU in the Peach Bowl, and that sort of catapulted them into the national kind of spotlight and relevance as they started. Then they beat Ohio State in the Orange Bowl, and by 2015, just a few years later, they were playing for a national championship. So winning these big SEC games, being sort of the giant killer, the SEC killer, is sort of what made Clemson or turned Clemson into, this powerhouse. Last couple of years, it hasn't been the case, though. Clemson went 0-3 against the SEC last year, losing to Georgia, South Carolina, and then losing another one in the playoff to Texas, a new SEC team. So 0-3 against the SEC last year. And really, in this post-Trevor Lawrence era, Clemson has not been bad. That's probably unfair, but they've been a step below what they were before, beating up on a kind of mediocre ACC, but losing a lot of these big games against SEC opponents. They lost to Georgia in 2021 and 2024. They lost to Tennessee in the Orange Bowl in 2022. They lost to South Carolina twice in 22 and 24. And then the playoff game I just mentioned at Texas. Again, Clemson has not been bad, but they got to get back to winning these big games. Now you've got the team that is the odds-on favorite to win the ACC, hosting LSU, who's expected to be good, but they haven't won an opener since Joe Burrow was there in 2019. And they're probably projecting to be maybe the 5th maybe the sixth best team in the SEC, kind of a fringe playoff team. But when LSU, the fifth or sixth best team in the SEC, goes to the best team in the ACC, they're in Clemson, in Clemson's Death Valley. If the SEC is winning that says a lot. That probably says there's 5 or 6 teams in the SEC better than everyone in the ACC. And that is not a statement ACC fans want to be made in that very first week. Now, I'm going to pause here and just say, hey, a shout out to Ready Vets. If you live in Greenville or the kind of metro upstate area of South Carolina, just save Ready Vets in your phone. If you have a dog or cat that's ever in need and needs urgent medical care, they're the place to go, owned by a Clemson graduate whose personal friend sponsors this channel. So shout out to them, and thank you to Dr. Chris Capps. Now, another big game, and this one is the Sunday of week 1, is Notre Dame at Miami. This one's a little different in that the ACC probably has less to lose here. Everyone will be expecting the national runner-up from last year to be a heavy favorite, and they should win that game. And that of course, is Notre Dame. And that's fine. So there's definitely less downside here. But if Miami could start off their season with this huge non-conference win, what does that say about them? I mean, a lot of people are high on them, picking them to go number 2 in the conference, make the playoff. I'm a little down on them, still suspect about how much better their defense gets, how much worse their offense gets. And that's not even a shot at Carson Beck as much as a compliment to Cam, who's leaving. But if they can go and start their year by beating Notre Dame, completely changes the narrative of a Miami program that falls short or blows it when they've got it going well. Would be a tremendous season opening win for them, especially if you pair that with wins for Georgia Tech and Clemson. And then the next day, Notre Dame falls to Miami. Suddenly the ACC is the talk of the opening week. So those are maybe the 3 biggest games that are all on week 1, which kind of sets the narrative. But there's 2 more I want to hit on. And one of them is maybe not one you're expecting. It's Illinois at Duke, and this is the next week. So this is week 2. I've got 2 basketball schools. So maybe it seems a little weird, but I'm pretty high on both of these. And I think the winner of this has a very legitimate chance to win 10 games. And with that, at least somewhat of a shot to actually make the playoff, maybe particularly if it's Illinois. But neither of these teams have a super hard schedule after this game. So the winner of this is likely 2-0. And if that's the case, after this contest for Duke, their toughest games are Georgia Tech, which will be tough, but it's at home, and at Clemson. If you win this game and split those, you have a fantastic playoff shot. For Illinois, it's a little tougher in the Big Ten, but there's still really only 2, like what I would call daunting games. And one of them, they go to Indiana, who made the playoff last year, and we think will be very good again. But it's Indiana. They haven't done this before, so maybe last year was a fluke. I don't know. I don't think so. But they go to Indiana and they host Ohio State. But in the Big Ten, with the tough schedules, if Illinois wins this game, and those are the only games they drop at 10-2, they're a playoff team. So the winner of this is probably going to be a top 25 team for maybe all year. And that really adds a lot of credence, as these teams are maybe not thought of in the same light as Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, Penn State for the Big Ten, Clemson, Miami, Louisville. Duke's maybe not thought of one of those top teams. So if one of these, half a tier below programs can be in the top 25 all year, have a legitimate shot at the playoff, that's a great narrative to have. And so this is a game to not forget, one of the better games to keep an eye on early in the year. And then lastly, I'm going back to the well with Miami again. And I think it's interesting because, you have 2 games here for Miami that could really say a lot about them and the conference. If Miami were to lose to Notre Dame and Florida, if it was the first game and the last game of the year, and they finish 9-3 or even 10-2, it's not that catastrophic. But if Miami goes 2-2 to start the season, they're sort of forgotten about. And as the number 2 pick and number 2, second most talented team by recruiting metrics in the conference, if that happens, that's a killer for the conference. That's a real killer for Miami. Conversely, last year we saw Cam Ward pretty much smoke Florida, throw it all over them, particularly in the second half. It was a little bit of a kind of a Heisman showcase for Cam Ward. And while I'm not saying they need to have that moment, if they can beat Florida, especially if they beat Notre Dame, but really regardless, beating Florida, beating an SEC team really shows that they're for real, they're legitimate, and says a lot about sort of that top tier of the ACC. And again, if they're supposed to be ACC 2 and Florida's supposed to be SEC 6, 7, or 8, you can't be losing that game, right? If the seventh best team, let's say, in Florida is beating the number 2 team in the ACC, that says a lot about those conferences. So this is another big one that the ACC needs to win. Thank you to our sponsor, Ready Vets. If you live in the upstate and have a dog or cat that needs immediate care, Ready Vets is the place to go. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe.